Today's project recipe is Full Moon Fun from 2021. The Full Moon Fun project recipe is very easily adopted from this Halloween theme to something completely different. This project recipe cutting guide calls for 3 designer papers, designer paper 1, designer paper 2, and designer paper 3, and 2 cardstocks, a white cardstock and a black cardstock. But after studying this project recipe and its design, and of course I don't consider the mats, I only need 2 designer papers and 1 cardstock plus whatever I'm going to punch with. So I'm going to be doing a lot of substituting, and let me get down to explaining how I'm going to do that. The designer papers that I'm going to use come from the Tropical Garden Designer Paper Pack. I've selected 2 sheets, but these are actually the same sheet, and I'm going to use the front and the back. The Tropical Garden collection came with the designer paper pack, a cardstock sampler pack. And included in that were several colors, including one called Pink Razzleberry, which is this color shown right here. And I'm going to be using that. But during my search for papers and cardstock, I saw taffy pink cardstock. Now, I think this came from a cardstock buffet that Creative Memories has, I think, once a year, where they release colors that are not part of their standard palette. And I've learned my lesson. When they offer it, buy it. So when we examine the sketch, basically the design is a 1/3, 2/3 design, but not in exact proportions. And we'll get to that as we're making the page. And then we have a large block. And we'll talk about that and what the instructions said, that if you didn't read the instructions, you could easily overlook. And by the way, I had to read the instructions 3 times before I really understood it. But once I did, I went, oh, this is super easy. So it is my goal today to make these instructions super easy if you would like to make this layout. So my intention is to do the 1/3, 2/3 designs with these papers. Now, because this is the back side of this and I need 2 pages, I am going to cut each piece and then weld it together. But that's actually the instructions, not necessarily exactly the way I'm going to do it. But right here, they show welding piece that has been cut from the cardstock. And I may cut those welding pieces from that cardstock. I haven't decided yet. And so now that I have my papers out, let me explain what I am going to do. Now I'm going to map my papers to what the cutting guide says. So it has designer paper number 1, and it has a punched border, and it has some mats for photos. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with photo mats. And as you know, when I make the project recipes, I don't even cut the mats because my photos rarely are the same. So I've decided to make this taffy pink where I'm going to cut at least 1 border. I may cut 2 borders from this, but this is sort of my paper number 1. So for paper number 3, the black cardstock, I'm going to use the pink razzleberry, and my intention is to cut the piece L and M out of this pink razzleberry paper. The instructions say choose the same paper for designer papers number 2 and number 3 that form the base. So for designer paper 2 and designer paper 3, I've chosen 2 of the same sheets. And this is my designer paper 2 and 3. When you look at designer papers 2 and 3, you have these 2 mats cut. But the width of these mats is the same width as this cardstock, 4 1/4. So instead of cutting these 2 pieces, I'm going to use these 2 pieces. I am going to reverse them and weld this piece to that piece and make my 12 by 12 background. So essentially, I'm having designer paper 2, designer paper 3, the raspberry cardstock, and then I'll punch borders from what is remaining. And I may need to pull into my scraps to get some more paper, but I'm okay with that. I hope I didn't confuse you with all of that, but once I start pulling this together, you're going to see it really is easy. So to summarize our steps, we're going to just cut papers to make the 2 backgrounds in a 1/3, 2/3 design. Then we're going to cut a big block. Then we're going to punch some strips. And then we're going to put it together and then put our photos on. The instructions actually read, leaving pieces L and M attached for now. So I'm going to cut piece L and M as a single piece, which is going to measure 10 inches across by 11 inches tall. And I guess I will go ahead also and cut off the 1 inch by 12 inch welding pieces because I believe I will use them. And next, after that, I will cut the 2 designer papers at 4 1/4 inches. And then I'll use the welding pieces to weld these 2 pieces back together with one side reversed. So I did all of that talking just to explain the steps I'm about to take. I'm going to cut 2 1 inch by 12 inch pieces from the pink raspberry. And then that will leave me with 10 inches in this direction. I'll rotate the paper and cut it to 11 inches. So I'll have a 10 inch by 11 inch block and 2 strips. The first cut is 1 inch by 12. So this gives me 10 inches by 11 inches. And I have 2 welding strips, and this is waste. I'm cutting these 2 pieces at 4 1/4 inch. Now this paper does not have a strong direction. This side looks a little directional because there's some words on the page. And so I'm treating this as the top of the paper. So I'm going to cut this way. If you have a paper that has a direction, please be mindful of that direction before you cut your paper. So this is what our base page is going to look like. I've taken our more colorful piece and turned it up, and then our tone on the bottom. I'm going to now reverse them. And by the way, this is also very pretty. And you can think of all kinds of variations you could do with this. So this is actually a configuration that you could use if you wish to do so, where you put your colors on the opposite sides. But that's not the plan for today. I'm turning these over so I can weld them together. So my method of welding, I'm going to turn this around to make it a little easier for me. I like to use my 13 by 13 inch mat to kind of make sure that when I'm welding, I'm actually getting the size I want. But because these two pieces of paper were already joined together, it's really not a big deal. Here are my welding strips. I'm going to put them to the side, and there are so many different ways of welding. My favorite way to weld is to use my tape runner and make sure that my papers are put together very close and very tightly, and run some tape, except I didn't do it right. Run the tape runner such that the tape crosses both pieces of paper. Okay, I'm not getting this on here. Oh, there we go. I need to look at what I'm doing better. Let's come down here. There we go. And so I want my tape to be on both pieces of paper, and I find that that gives me the best deal. And I don't have to run a continuous stream of tape all the way down. And so now I'm just going to put on my welding strip just because, to cover up the tape. So it's the tape holding the two pieces together, not the strip. Once again, for this paper, I'm going to try to get my tape runner across both pieces of paper. And then put my welding strip on to cover up the tape. Now that we have our pieces welded together, in comes our solid piece of pink razzleberry. This is piece L and piece M, but they're still attached for now. And I want to pause to say, this is where you can turn this into a single page layout with this lovely block of paper right here and this lovely place for photos. It's also, according to the instructions, you can put your embellishments on here and your borders as we're about to make. And of course, we're going to round our corners here very soon. So now we have our pink raspberry cardstock, and we're going to work with it as a whole before we cut it and then spread the pieces across. So the next thing I want to do is round the corners. And when I put that down, I love it. I don't use my corner rounder enough. Now that we've rounded our corners on piece L and M, our next step is to put down our borders, but we haven't punched them yet. And so that's where the taffy pink comes in. So I'm going to cut 2 taffy pinks and then choose a third color. I'm using the Petal Scallop Decorative Border Punch, and I just love this design. I'm going to cut 2 of these. If you're not familiar with a Creative Memories punch, typically you start and align your paper at the beginning about here with one of these black lines. If you're going to punch to your left, use the left line. If you're punching to your right, use the right line. This is also a chain style punch. So Just this petal scallop design is going to come out as a freestanding chain. After you use a punch like this, you are often left with these little triangles. They were used to help guide the paper through the punch to align it correctly. I'm going to take a pair of scissors and snip this off. You could also use your 12-inch trimmer, but because I don't need a smooth line, the scissors will be fine. I just want to make sure that when I put the paper up against the back, it is on the straight side, not going to be offset by these little triangles. So to punch my third border, I went into my scraps and I found this, which is a dual tone. Now these dual tones came out in 2024 as a paper buffet special offering. And these colors are flamingo pink and raspberry rouge. And so they blend absolutely beautifully, especially the flamingo pink, I think goes well with this paper. And I think that's the side I'm going to use. But I believe this to be the best choice. I really, really like it. To have a contrasting but yet coordinating paper to cut my third border. So this is a dry fit of how the petal scallop border fits just beautifully onto our razzleberry cardstock. I love how you can offset these and they just flow together so beautifully. You know, I definitely see me making this again and using some other punches and cartridges to make this design. I love the rounded corners. And I could I could space them tightly together to get a different look. Man, I like it like that also. I am going to space them apart, but I think they're beautiful when put close together like this. Just shows you how a beautifully done punch can be so versatile. Okay, I'm going to be using my repositionable tape. And the first thing I want to do is to make sure that I'm placing my cardstock on the 13 by 13 inch mat very straight, because I'm going to be using that to get this first petal on straight. So I'm about to position my first border onto my cardstock, and I want this bottom edge of my scallop to be about 1/2 inch from the bottom edge of my cardstock. So I'm using this ruler to kind of help me position that, and more importantly, to help me get it on straight. So wherever you want it positioned, you can choose that. The reason I chose the 1/2 inch was I wanted to protect my rounded corners from being covered up by the border, because that way I know that the full edge is going to be showing. And now the next two borders. Now when putting on my second border, I'm eyeballing it to give it just a little bit of separation from the lower border. And now for the top border, I'm actually shifting over one scallop to try to help me gauge getting this as centered as possible on the page. And I really like that. So now I have these edges that are hanging off, and I'm just going to use my scissors to cut off these edges. That is so pretty. I really like that. Now that we have our block and we've adhered our scallop petals, it's time to cut piece L and M apart. The instructions say that piece L is 7 3/4 inches wide and piece M is 2 1/4 inch wide. Now, it is important that we get the left and the right side correct. So we're going to make sure when we cut that we orient the paper to get the left and the right side correct. So yes, I have monochromatic fever, but I just love this. This is so beautiful. And I'm going to make it again. So here's how the photo configurations are arranged for the project recipe. On the left side, you have two vertical 4x6s at a little canted angle. And then you have two vertical 3x4 photos. And on the right, you have two horizontal 6x4 photos, a single, I think they're down a little lower here, a single 4x4 and a single 3x4. And I think that's just gorgeous. So let's see what I come up with for my photos. And here is our finished layout. I found photos. I matted them on the white because the colors were so close to the background papers that they needed to be lifted off the page a little bit, but they go beautifully, I think, with the papers, which is why I chose those papers. But this is a great layout design that is versatile for a variety of types and numbers of photos. I just put a very simple title over here, and I wish I had more food themed embellishments to put on here. And I could have probably made this layout with the dine punch, but I use that punch on everything. So I'm happy to do something a little different. And I made this tag and made it a cluster base. I got these three stickers here from the Totally Tonal Soft Pink sticker set. And I punched some papers from my tiny little scraps. And that Spring Blooms punch is just getting a workout. I love putting it on all of my layouts. And I used the chrysanthemum punch. And this is a tiny piece of purple ice cardstock, actually. But I think the purple definitely goes with the photos here. And, I'm trying to improve my embellishment cluster, so I was happy with how this one turned out. I love using that Spring Blooms punch, and this came from the Chrysanthemums punch. I love these tiny little elements to just finish off a cluster base. And so I hope you have enjoyed this unclad project recipe? And if so, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And YouTube is going to recommend another video, so I hope you'll watch it also. Oh man, I am so going to make this again. This is so pretty, and I am so going to make this again. You know, don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just watch. Boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Have a fine, scrappy day.